The script of doom, a silence before the storm. There is a terrifying rhythm to history, a heartbeat of rise and fall that most civilizations are too deaf to hear until it stops. We like to believe that history is a series of random events, but the truth is far more chilling. There is a pattern. It is a blueprint of destruction that has claimed 3 global superpowers in the last 500 years, burying them under the weight of their own hubris. And right now, in 2025, the United States is not merely observing this pattern. We are acting it out, scene by scene, almost as if we are reading from the same cursed script that led to absolute catastrophe for every empire that came before us. The players change, but the story remains brutally consistent. In 1590, Spain was the master of the universe, drowning in gold. By 1914, Britain was the colossus upon which the sun never set. In 1991, the Soviet Union possessed enough nuclear fire to crack the world in half. Yet, they all vanished or diminished into irrelevance. They were not conquered by alien armies or destroyed by meteorites. They were dismantled by a specific mathematical sequence of decisions, a suicide pact written in economics and arrogance. What makes this moment in 2025 so terrifying is the illusion of safety. We have been trained by Hollywood to expect imperial collapse to look like an apocalypse, burning cities, foreign paratroopers filling the skies, and sudden explosions. But real imperial death is far more insidious. It does not begin with a bang, it begins with a rot. It starts with economic exhaustion, hidden behind the facade of military might. It is the quiet cancer of an empire extending its arms wider than its lungs can breathe. It is the invisible accumulation of promises that cannot be kept, wars that cannot be paid for, and a lifestyle financed by money that doesn't exist. At first, the decline is invisible to the naked eye. The aircraft carriers still sail, the stock market still flashes green, and the currency is still accepted at the counter. But beneath the surface, the tectonic plates are shifting. The foundation is turning to sand. This brings us to the most harrowing realization of our time. This pattern of death consists of 7 distinct stages. The United States hasn't just dipped its toe into this water, we are drowning in it. As of today, we have already completed, fully and undeniably, 5 of these 7 stages. We are not approaching the danger zone. We are deep inside the reactor core, watching the gauges turn red. We are sleepwalking through the exact same sequence that turned the Spanish Empire into a historical footnote and the Soviet Union into a memory. The script has been written, the stage is set, and unless we wake up to the reality of the math, the final act is about to begin. Ghosts of the past, the Spanish mirage and the British sunset. To understand our future, we must walk through the graveyards of the past. The first tombstone belongs to Spain, the original architect of the modern global empire. Travel back to 1590. Spain was not merely a country, it was a titan. After Columbus cracked open the New World, Spanish galleons flooded Europe with rivers of silver and mountains of gold. They controlled the global money supply, and their infantry was the most feared force on the planet. King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, possessed more wealth than any monarch in human history. But wealth creates the illusion of invincibility, and that illusion was Spain's death sentence. Philip fell into stage 1, military overextension with a terrifying fervor. He believed he could fight the world, waging simultaneous wars against the Ottoman Empire, the French, the Dutch rebels, and the English Navy. To fund this global crusade, Spain committed economic suicide. They entered stage 2, currency debasement, committing the ancient equivalent of the modern money printer. They began mixing cheap copper into their silver coins. A coin that was once pure value became 50% copper, then 75%, until the currency was a lie. Simultaneously, they succumbed to stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Drowning in easy silver, the Spanish nobility deemed work beneath them. Why build ships or grow food when you can buy them? Spain became a hollow conduit. Wealth flowed through them, not to them. Within 80 years, the richest empire on earth declared bankruptcy 4 times and collapsed into a second-rate power, a ghost of its former glory. Fast forward 300 years, and the British Empire stepped onto the stage to reenact the same tragedy. By 1914, Britain was the undisputed master of the globe. They controlled 25% of the Earth's land, and the pound sterling was the bedrock of global finance. London was the center of the world, and they believed the sun would never set on their dominion. But the pattern does not care about hubris. When World War I erupted, Britain faced a choice: preserve their wealth or bankrupt the empire to win. They chose the fight. The war hemorrhaged their gold reserves, shipping their wealth across the Atlantic to pay for American steel and food. By the time the smoke cleared, the world's banker had become the world's beggar. Desperate to maintain the illusion of power, they tried to defend the pound, but the mathematics were unforgiving. In 1931, the dam broke. Britain abandoned the gold standard, and the pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency had failed. The final blow was swift. After the financial exhaustion of World War II, Britain simply could not afford to be an empire. In 1947, they lost India, the crown jewel. Over the next 2 decades, the rest of the empire evaporated. In less than a single human lifetime, Britain went from ruling the waves to becoming America's junior partner, a living museum of past greatness. They thought they were different. They thought they were permanent. They were wrong. The 900-day freefall. The Soviet implosion. The most recent and perhaps the most terrifying ghost story in the Library of Empires is the Soviet Union, 1945-1991. To the outside world, the USSR was a monolithic beast, a terrifying red menace that kept American schoolchildren hiding under their desks. It was a nuclear superpower with the ability to incinerate the planet, possessing the largest army in history and a space program that had beaten America to the stars. They controlled half of Europe and believed, with religious fervor, that they were the future, that communism would inevitably bury capitalism. But behind the Iron Curtain and the parades of ballistic missiles, the empire was already dead. It just hadn't fallen over yet. The Soviet Union provides the perfect clinical example of an empire dying from the inside out. They were locked in a suicidal embrace with Stage 1, military overextension. Paralyzed by paranoia and the need to project strength, the Kremlin was bleeding the country dry, pouring a staggering 15% to 20% of their entire GDP into the military machine. This was triple the rate of American spending. They were financing revolutions in Angola, propping up a failing regime in Cuba, and fighting a disastrous war in Afghanistan. All while their own citizens waited in bread lines. They were starving the body to feed the fist. This obsession led directly to Stage 2 and Stage 4, stagnation and loss of production. The Soviet economy was a mirage. Because central planning kills incentive, innovation vanished. Factories met quotas by producing junk that no one could use. But the ultimate humiliation was agricultural. Despite possessing the black earth of Ukraine, some of the most fertile soil on the planet, the Soviet Union could not feed itself. By the 1980s, the superpower was begging on the global market, importing millions of tons of grain from the West just to survive. The system was held together by a single thread: high oil prices. The ruble was monopoly money, worthless outside Soviet borders. When oil prices crashed in the mid-1980s, the lifeline was cut. The illusion shattered. What followed should haunt every modern economist. It was Stage 7, and it happened with breathtaking speed. We tend to think of empires fading away over centuries, but the Soviet end was a violent, compressed implosion. It took merely 900 days from the first crack in the Berlin Wall in 1989 to the total dissolution of the USSR on December 26, 1991. There was no NATO invasion, no World War III. The Soviet Union, with its 30,000 nuclear warheads and millions of soldiers, was not defeated on the battlefield. It was defeated by a bank ledger. It simply ran out of money, ceased to function, and evaporated into the night, leaving behind a lesson that the world seems eager to forget. You cannot print, borrow, or bomb your way out of economic reality. The American medical record, diagnosis terminal. So where do we stand in this grim timeline? If history is a main Doctor, The United States is the patient lying on the operating table, and the vital signs are screaming a warning that we are refusing to hear. We are no longer looking at the pattern of collapse from a safe distance. We are living inside it. The United States has systematically checked the boxes of the first 5 stages, replicating the exact errors of our fallen predecessors with terrifying precision. First, consider Stage 1, military overextension. On paper, we are a colossus, maintaining over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We spend a staggering $850 billion annually on defense, more than the next 10 nations combined. But this is a hollow strength. We are stretched so thin that the fabric is tearing. The Pentagon's own war games suggest that if we were forced to confront a simultaneous crisis, China invading Taiwan, Russia pushing into NATO territory, and Iran closing the Persian Gulf, we would break. We are the global policemen, but we are bankrupt and exhausted, policing a neighborhood that no longer fears the badge. Then there is the economic suicide of Stage 2 and Stage 3. Since 1971, when the gold window was closed, the dollar has been an unbacked fiat currency. But since 2020, we have gone from debasement to insanity. In just a few short years, we printed over $6 trillion, diluting the dollar's value until it has lost 98% of its purchasing power compared to gold. This has triggered the debt spiral. We are currently staring at a national debt of $36 trillion. The math has become grotesque. For the first time in history, the U.S. government is spending more on interest payments to bondholders than it spends on the military. We are literally borrowing money today just to pay the interest on the money we borrowed yesterday. This is not finance, it is a Ponzi scheme. Perhaps most dangerous is Stage 4, the loss of productive capacity. Like the Spanish nobility who forgot how to work, America has forgotten how to make things. We have gutted our manufacturing base, shipping our factories to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. We run an annual trade deficit of $800 billion. We have become a nation of consumers, financiers, and middlemen, utterly dependent on foreign supply chains for our survival, from the microchips in our missiles to the antibiotics in our hospitals. If the ships stop coming, America stops functioning. And finally, we see the rot of Stage 5, social decay. The internal pillars are crumbling. Trust in institutions has collapsed. Our cities are plagued by rising crime and homelessness, while fentanyl kills 100,000 citizens a year. Political polarization has paralyzed the government, making us look less like a superpower and more like two hostile tribes trapped in the same border. The symptoms are undeniable. We have not just copied the mistakes of Spain, Britain, and the USSR, we have perfected them. We are a superpower living on borrowed time and borrowed money. The final act, the great unraveling, we have arrived at the precipice. The first 5 stages were the symptoms of the disease, but what comes next is the fatality. We are currently standing on the razor's edge of Stage 6, loss of reserve currency status. This is the moment the exorbitant privilege of the United States, the ability to print money that the rest of the world is forced to absorb, comes to a violent end. The cracks in the dam are no longer microscopic. They are widening before our eyes. Look around. The world is actively preparing for a future without the dollar. The BRICS nations are not merely a trade alliance. They are building a financial lifeboat to escape the sinking American ship. Central banks from Beijing to Warsaw are buying gold at a record pace, signaling that they no longer trust American debt as a store of value. Saudi Arabia, the linchpin of the petrodollar system that has sustained American dominance for 50 years, is now openly trading oil in Chinese yuan. The message is clear. The world is tired of financing our deficits. When Stage 6 fully hits, the consequences will be catastrophic. For decades, we have exported our inflation to other countries, but when the world rejects the dollar, those trillions of unwanted greenbacks will have nowhere to go but home. They will come flooding back into the domestic economy like a tsunami. The result will not just be inflation. It will be a hyperinflationary firestorm that incinerates the savings of the middle class and makes the cost of living crisis of the 2020s look like a golden age, and that triggers the finale. Stage 7, collapse. There is a dangerous misconception that the end of a superpower is a slow, graceful decline, like a sunset. It is not. It is an avalanche. As Ernest Hemingway famously wrote about bankruptcy, it happens gradually, then suddenly. The Soviet Union seemed eternal until the very week it vanished. The British Empire seemed invincible until the moment it was broke. Stage 7 is a chain reaction. A currency crisis triggers a sovereign debt crisis. The government, unable to borrow, is forced to print even more, which destroys the currency further. This economic chaos instantly morphs into a political crisis. When the checks stop clearing, when the military cannot be paid, and when the pension funds evaporate, the social contract is torn to shreds. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency becomes a collector's item, and the empire becomes a memory. History is a ruthless judge, and mathematics is an executioner that cannot be bribed. The United States is currently betting its survival on the idea that this time is different. But the pattern says otherwise. The ghosts of Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union are screaming the truth. No empire is too big to fail. Unless we pull off a miracle of reform, we are about to learn that the laws of economics apply to everyone, even America. The script is written. The question is, can we stop the play before the curtain falls?